This meeting is being live streamed. And once that's there, I'll copy that URL onto the meetup page.
It's beautiful.
And let me copy this. Into here.
David, I'll join you in a second, okay?
That's fine. You can just turn off your camera, yeah. So I'm going to let the attendees start arriving now.
Yeah.
Start webinar. And they will pop in, and they won't all come at the start time. It's always the way. Some of them will find their way here after a few minutes, which is why we'll start slow.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the beauty of having events on Saturday.
Well, yes, people should be able to attend.
Yeah.
It's normally a good date. So
it is, yeah, and it's completely different feeling, right? You don't need to run anywhere.
Quite. And as you know, at the end, once we finish a formal session, I will give people the chance, and usually about maybe a quarter of the attendees will stay, and I will promote everybody to being a panelist, so everybody's face can come on the screen. But there's no requirement. There's no requirement for you to stay longer, because we've already had, by that stage, 90 minutes of your time. But of course, you are very welcome to pop in and out of that.
Yeah, I'll try to stay for a while. I'm always enjoying this discussion. I want all of us to be panelists, right, in this life.
Yeah.
Taking control and responsibility for our own health.
Yes. So it's my view there should be a kind of a solid discussion in the beginning, which sets out some themes, and then people will elaborate on these themes. They will take the themes in different directions.
Sure. Yeah. Because Steve Buss, hi. Thanks for your greetings.
Yes. So Steve looks a lot at longevity issues. He's got his own views, which he may express in the questions about some understudied mechanisms that might tap into natural mechanisms which could help the body to live longer. Everybody else who's joining, by all means, say hello in the chat too. And if you are chatting, if you're not sure about it, you can click beside the two. Instead of just sending your messages to Sergey and me, you can speak to everyone. So hi, Richard O'Regan from London. And there'll be more joining, I think, shortly. There's usually a few people who struggle at this stage. So I have to keep my eye on my inbox and on the meetup messages where people will possibly be contacting me. So far, so good. Let's come back here. Let's wait a few more minutes before we kick off properly. And just keep an eye on the YouTube as well. That's going fine. Right. In that case, let me press the button to make a longer term recording. The webinar is being recorded, although I will edit it slightly later on, taking out the bit at the beginning and the bit at the end when nothing's properly happening. So as I said, Sergey, I'll speak for about a minute or two, and then we'll get going. So let's get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is David Wood and I chair London Futurists. Today's topic is the science and technology of growing young, which also happens to be the title of the new book written by today's speaker, the longevity investor and visionary, Sergey Young. It's a book, I can say, with a lot of wisdom in it. Not all of that wisdom is due to the author, as he'll be quick to acknowledge. Some of that wisdom comes from the numerous well-informed researchers, practitioners, and analysts of the field of anti-aging medicine who Sergey interviewed in the course of preparing this book. Some people whose work and ideas feature in the book include Cynthia Kenyon, who has been active in this field since the early 1980s and who is now one of the leading figures in Alphabet Calico, a sister company of Google. Dave Asprey, the renowned biohacker and the founder of Bulletproof Nutrition. Harvard University professors David Sinclair and George Church. Film director and producer Sir Peter Jackson. The chair and CEO of United Therapeutics Corps, Martin Rothblatt, and billionaire technology investor Jim Mellon of the Juvenescence Fund. And there are many other people interviewed as well who are less well known today, but who may become more famous as their research and products prove their value in wider use in the years to come. So I congratulate Sergey on inspiring all these interviewees to share their latest key ideas about the scientific possibility and moral importance of the breakthroughs that could dramatically extend our lifespans, happening within just a few decades. But Sergey's book also contains a great deal of his own personal stamp and insight too, as you can now experience for yourself as he takes over the virtual microphone from me. So Sergey, welcome to London Futurists. Maybe you can just start by explaining what led you to write this book.
Hey, David. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here with you today. Thanks for this opportunity. Well, a short version of the answer is when I caught longevity virus, as some people joke, I thought the best way to support the place and development of longevity field is by investing and supporting scientists and entrepreneurs who are doing something and developing longevity field. And so I set up this $100 million longevity vision fund. And for the last 3 years, the team of the fund and me, we're looking at 200 longevity technology companies a year. So I thought it's just enormous information flow that we had a privilege and honor to have access to. And there are so many things, so many exciting things happening in our space. So I really wanted to share that with the public. So that's one. Well, the other thing, book is a great door opener. And I had an amazing opportunity to interview and spend time with all of the amazing people that you, David, just mentioned. And the list is obviously much, much longer than that. So it was a great learning exercise. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a biologist. So one of my 3 degrees is in chemical engineering, which is pretty helpful in our field. So I really wanted to take the knowledge, experience, aspiration, and vision from all this beautiful group and distill it in pretty simple and understandable terms for the public. So that's the idea behind the science and technology of growing young.
And just to introduce yourself a bit more to people who don't know you, you've mentioned you have a degree in chemical engineering. You've mentioned you have looked after investments. Can you just fill us in on a little bit more of your background?
Sure. So I'm, as you can tell from my accent and my name, I'm originally from Russia. And I was born as not in the middle of nowhere, but like in the end of nowhere. My hometown was very small by the shores of Pacific Ocean and Japanese Sea. It was 200 miles to Japan, and it was 300 miles to the regional capital. This is how far I went when I was born. So then, obviously Perestroika came and Gorbachev, all these changes in USSR. I've done 3 degrees, chemical engineering, then banking and finance, and third degree in is business administration in Warwick Business School. And I was working in parallel because my parents lost job in the course of all these tectonic changes in Russia. And since the age of 18, I started to work full time and study full time. That was possible at this period of time. And well, that's pretty much my personal story. Then I was doing investments. I'm 49 today, and I was doing investments for the last 20 years. Well, that's why when I started to develop an interest in longevity and I wanted to expand and support this space, I thought, well, just continue my investing activity would be probably the best way to leverage my previous experience in this new field. I'm also doing a lot of things. Longevity is my passion. And everything I do in longevity is my contribution to the world. Yeah. So I'm not taking any money from it. In fact, I actually wanted to distribute this book for free, but distributing books for free doesn't really work with the publishing industry paradigm. So I had to sell it. I'm doing a lot of things like, so this book, I'm founder of Longevity Vision Fund. We invest in 10, 12 longevity related companies every year. So the current portfolio is somewhere around 20 companies. I'm also board member of American Federation of Aging Research. I'm in a working group in UK Parliament on developing national longevity strategy for UK. What else? I'm innovation board member of XPRIZE Foundation, and this is the foundation which run global competition, pro bono competitions to solve world biggest problems. We just launched the largest one together with Elon Musk called Carbon Removal to develop technology which will utilize CO2 from the atmosphere, and from that, this technology will make like a minimum viable, useful product. And my dream was always been to do Age Reversal XPRIZE, to invite 200, 300, like 400 teams from 50 plus countries to compete within this competition to develop technology which will help us to reverse aging processes in our body, obviously measured by a set of biomarkers. Well, that's probably what I'm doing in longevity space. And I'm a big fan of changing as many lives as possible. I do believe whatever technology has to offer to us in 10, 20 years from now, there's so many things that we can do today to live at least 200 healthy and happy years. So I'm working a lot with corporations and with governments, again, pro bono, to implement either corporate longevity programs or national longevity programs in the scale of particular enterprise or factory or corporation, or in a scale of the particular country.
How do you decide which of these companies to invest in, given that maybe you get 200 companies a year approaching you or in your radar? How do you decide which of the 10 or 12 actually are the ones that should be invested in?
Yeah.
Maybe this is a secret, but maybe you can share some
no,
of
it's
that.
not a secret. Like, I mean, and probably our audience have this feeling already by attending events with other people. Like when I entered longevity space, I got this feeling, and it's still here, and it's the same. This is the most uncompetitive supporting field I've ever worked with. Like, and even if I lose on all of my 20 investments, if someone will find a way to extend our health span and lifespan and bring more productive and healthy years to our life, I will win anyway. So that's the overall paradigm. So nothing is really confidential here. So remember, we're working on affordable and accessible version of longevity. I'm not really interested in develop something which would cost $1 million or £1 million and will be available only to a handful of people on Earth. I do believe that technology and science today give us an opportunity to completely transform healthcare. So the first criteria is affordability and accessibility aspect. And I'm very happy to report to our audience today, like, in more than 50% of cases, when we invest in a company, this company brings a radical optimization to solving, particular health problem, which is currently under question. And the effect of this optimization is decreased by 10, 20, not percent times. Whether we're investing in affordable and accessible ultrasound devices or DIY diagnostic tool to do diagnostic of colon cancer, or liver regeneration technology, which would cost 50 times less than the current cost of surgery or liver transplantation. So this is the type of magnitude that of the effect that we're trying to invest. So criteria number one, it should be affordable and accessible, or have a clear path for this technology or this intervention to be affordable and accessible to everyone, or almost to everyone. So that's one thing. Second thing, we obviously were looking at intellectual property strategy of any particular company, and by doing this, we're trying to solve one problem. The problem is aging today is not considered as a formal disease. It's neither formal disease nor important risk factor. So there's no economic model, there's no regulatory model that would support you investing millions of pounds or dollars or billions of pounds of dollars into fighting aging or age-related disease, because you couldn't really build your IP protection, your intellectual property on that, and you will never be able to pay back your investment. So criteria number two is we investing in the companies who are viable and sustainable in the current regulatory environment. And if aging will be recognized as disease, there's going to be like a source of additional upside. So for us, longevity is an important side effect, like number one side effect of the companies that we're investing in. But nevertheless, the company should be viable and should continue to exist, even if aging will not be recognized as disease or regulatory environment will not change. So that's important as well. And third is just typical investment criteria. Like we're looking at partnerships that this company builds with people, with investors, with academic institutions, with big pharma or medical devices companies as well. Remember, when we're making decisions, we're looking at the company for 2 or 3 months, and it's literally it's a really compressed period of time to build our judgment whether we're investing or not. So we're always looking at what this group of people, this team, what they have been building so far, and usually it's an outcome of 2, 3, 5 years of their work. It's very representative.
Can you share something about some of the companies you have invested in, some of the things they're doing that maybe might surprise or particularly interest the audience?
Yeah. So let me start with. I'll probably cover 3 that I already mentioned. So one is we invested in a company called Eco Imaging. I think it was our first investment, which building very affordable version of ultrasound device. It's actually in the size of our smartphone, and what it does, you can scan, or nurse or doctor can scan, do ultrasound diagnostic. Everything goes to cloud, and then artificial intelligence pre-analyze all of that. So you don't need to run this device. You actually don't need to spend at least 2 years in a medical school to learn how to use it. I mean, obviously, in the end of the day, you're going to have your discussion with a medical professional, but it's basically democratized access to ultrasound diagnostic. And the cost of this device is somewhere around $2,000. They go into the market by the end of this year. And just for comparison, the ultrasound device, like the large one that you have in the hospital next door, can cost anywhere between $100,000 and $200,000. So that's incredible. It's like 50 times difference. Obviously, we would need to continue to use the larger device, but like for diagnostic at home, through telemedicine, or in some of the communities who don't have access to healthcare. This is really important. We are on the way to democratizing ultrasound diagnostic. So that's one. Two, we did invest in two companies who are using artificial intelligence to disrupt and to compress drug development and drug discovery cycle. If you look at the United States, the average development cycle for the drug is somewhere around 12 years, and the cost of it is 2.6 billion, because the ratio of failures is enormous. Usually, what I've heard, like out of 5,000 candidates and ideas for the drug, only one make it to the pharmacy in 12 years time. So what this company is using, and the name of this company, one of these, it's called Insilico Medicine. They're based in Hong Kong and set up by Alex Zhavoronkov, whom, I'm pretty sure a lot of you knows. And then the other one is Valo Health, and it's been established in Boston by David Berry, one of the most prominent biotechnology investors and venture capitalists. He was and he's still a partner in Flagship Pioneering, one of the most successful biotech funds in the US, in Boston. So what they do, they use artificial intelligence to compress the first period or the first stage of drug development, where this company looking for candidates like chemical formulas or molecules to test on the later stage. And by doing that, in some of the cases, they've managed to compress like what it takes somewhere around 2 years in the usual big pharma setting into 2 months. I mean, obviously it's not always the case, but I do know that because of these companies and because of the people that I'm familiar with in the big pharma world, artificial intelligence is on the way to make a huge disruption and decrease the cost of drug development and cost of drugs as well in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's like a second piece. And the third one, and this is my favorite one, I'm always fascinating to tell this story. This is the company which, and the first investor in this company was actually Jim Mellon and Juvenescence. We joined later on as investors. The company called Genesis, and what they do, they based in Pittsburgh in the US. What they do, they take part of the donor liver. They actually take donor liver, they split it in 50 to 75 pieces. They use very simple laparoscopic operation to put it in your lymph node, actually here. Well, this is like the best place to regrow organs. And in the course of 3 to 6 months, from this very small nucleus, the new liver is growing inside your body. And it actually takes a lot of functions from liver, which is not functioning or not working properly today. Well, the beauty of this concept is, number one, we have a huge problem with donor organs. Only in US, I know the statistics from there, there are 117,000 people who are on the waiting list to receive donor organs, and liver usually is in a huge demand. And this is because a lot of organs are lost in the process of transportation. This is because not a lot of us are big fans of idea of donating organs after our death, but also because it's one donor and one recipient relationship. Like Genesis has managed to use one donor liver, to help 50 to 75 patients. This is completely different. Like the cost of liver transplantation in the US is from $600,000 to $800,000. This is surgery only. Imagine if we will be able to decrease it by 25 or 50 times. That's going to be amazing. So like Genesis done it in mice, primates, dogs, pigs, and they just got FDA approval earlier this year to start human trials. So they're starting human trials in November this year. So this is not sci-fi. And this is beautiful that we can actually see the development of this technology, and we can help a lot of people in need. So these are the 3 examples of the companies that we invested in.
Your book talks about people might live to 150 or beyond. Now, the companies you've mentioned all sound like they've got very interesting technology, but do you think that these technologies, these solutions will be sufficient to allow people to live to 150?
Yeah, like before we go into this exact question, a few things. One is, I do believe that in 20 years from now, the biggest obstacles for us to enjoy the benefits of this longevity technology and life extension is not going to be science, not going to be technology. It's going to be ethics and regulation. Because like I've just done a TEDx talk called Morality of Immortality. And this is actually the name of the final chapter in the book called Morality of Immortality. And the whole notion of it is, we have created the science and technology to extend our life, but we haven't created life that we want to extend. So if we have time today, David, and if we will have more questions from the audience, let's discuss the ethical implication of all these technologies. So that's one. Two, the second caveat is, look, I don't think we're working on quantity of years only. Quality is very important, and for majority of people, the quality of our life, quality of these added years is much more important than quantity. So, well, let's just make sure that we discuss that our job and our mission is not only like technically increase the number of years that we live. We're working on health span and lifespan. And frankly speaking, people think it's mutually exclusive. Like, there's a group of people working on lifespan. There's a group of people working on health span. Within the 20 companies that we invested in, I've never seen any conflict between following these two targets, two objectives. And then final caveat before I'll answer your question is, look, I'm 49 today, and the maximum lifespan on Earth that we had, on for the record, thanks to this beautiful French woman who died 20 years ago, is 122 years. So it's very easy for me or for anyone to overpromise. So I can tell you, like, David, of course we're gonna break the sound barrier of 122 years, but like the first year when we can check whether, you know, I can break it and live beyond 122 years, gonna be in 73 years from now. So in a way, let's look at this discussion as an aspiration, as important dialogue where we can draw a lot of conclusion for today. But then coming back to your questions, what we've been doing so far, and this is why the average lifespan on Earth has been increasing almost twofold in the last 100 years, and the maximum lifespan always stayed the same, somewhere around 120 years. We've been avoiding early death. So we are not living longer. We're just not dying earlier. Well, that's the reason why the lifespan is always increasing. So that's today, and that's in the past. All of these technologies that I mentioned 3 minutes ago are technologies from the near horizon of longevity, and this is how I call it in the book. And I do believe they will help us to break the sound barrier of maximum lifespan of 122 years. So, like in a current biological form, I do believe we will have some species or humans who will be able to live to 150 years, somewhere around that. Again, this is irresponsible promise. Before we check that, we're going to live another 100 years. But then if we want to live longer, beyond 150 years, like 200 or whatever the number is, if you really like this idea, we would need to redefine human. We would need to work with our DNA. We would need to change the perspective from biological view of human body to engineering view of human body, and combine and complement man and machine. So that's like what I call far horizon of longevity. This will be available to us in the next 25, 50 years. And this is the world of human avatars, human brain, AI integration, world of replaceable organs, world of genetically modified people, and world which going to consist of Internet of Bodies. Similar to Internet of Things that we have today, world going to be, we will all be interconnected. We're going to be full of sensors. I'm full of sensors today. So I have Whoop, Apple Watch, Oura Ring to measure my sleep. continuous glucose monitor, and similar to the cars that we currently monitor through computer and sensors, we're going to be monitoring our body. All of this going to be interconnected with decentralized AI run healthcare management system. And well, this is the future of the world. Again, there's just a lot of ethical implications and ethical constraints to this world. And I do believe that actually we need to start to work on the ethics of that today, not in 25 years from now.
Well, let's discuss the ethics then. So what are the topics that you think most need to be raised up into the public discussion?
So, well, first of all, thanks for this question, David. Well, first of all, let's talk about constraints. People always ask me like, well, Sergey, world is already overpopulated. We have 8 billion, somewhere around 8 billion people today on Earth. Well, if you're going to extend the lifespan and health span of the people, we will have overpopulated Earth. So yes and no. First of all, if you look at some of the research which has been published, and I think that the best one we've seen was published in Lancet early last year, which do the mathematic modeling of the world population, how it's evolved in the next 80 to 100 years. You'll see that the population of Earth will peak somewhere around 10 and 11 billion around 2050, 30 years from now. And then this will go down somewhere to around 8 billion people by the end of this century. Why is that? Because of very low reproductive rates. We've been so successful with offering people alternatives outside their family life. And so reproductive rates, like for one woman in developed countries, we have 1.3, 1.5 kids. So the population of Earth actually will decline after 2050 rather than increase. Like China alone will lose 600 million people, from 1.4 billion to 0.8 billion in the end of the century. So it's not like, I don't feel like we have an option whether we work on life extension and health span extension. I do think it's almost like necessity to respond to this demographic crisis. So that's one. Second thing, other resources, I'm not concerned about energy. We've seen in our lifetime how the cost of renewable energy decreased exponentially. Or the same goes with food. Like when people ask me, like, Sergey, like 1 billion people on Earth are hungry and don't have proper access to food. Look at US. Every night in the US, 45% of the food goes to waste from our households, from supermarkets, from restaurants. We have plenty of food on this planet. We're just really inefficient with redistribution of that. So let's just come back to the underlying question. So what are the more like the biggest ethical issues that people see behind the concept of morality, of immortality, or radical life extension? Few things. One is inequality gap. So you can see, like, every year the gap between rich and poor is increasing, and we still haven't managed to find the proper answer to that. I actually do believe that affordable and accessible version of healthcare and longevity should be universal, basic good and service, should be offered to everyone for free. And think about this: if technology and science will help us to decrease the cost of interventions by a factor of 10, 20, 50 times, we have the opportunity to do so. So I do believe all of these technologies can be unifying theme for the planet, for the nations, rather than the theme which would continue to divide people. So that's one. Second piece is about our relationship with Mother Nature. If we live in 75 years, some people can afford to live this in pretty irresponsible way, because, well, they would just think, okay, my grandkids will need to sort it out. I will not face the consequences of my own actions. Well, if we live longer, if we live 120 or 150 years, we will face the consequences of our own actions. And I think, with what is happening in global warming today, we already start seeing that. So it's time to take back responsibility and control, not only for our own health, but the health of our planet. And the third one is probably about social constructs. Like, all these social constructs that we have today has been developed for the world, where average person live for 35 or 45 or 40 years. Well, think about marriage. 2/3 of the marriages in developed world, in majority of countries in the world, end up with divorce in the first 5 to 7 years. So we need to be more creative to help people to define their mutual responsibility to raise the kids, like kids raising partnership, whatever the form is that. It's unfortunately, it's too binary to define the whole relationship and mutual interdependency in this world, or this whole concept of retirement and work. It's so binary. It's I'm either working full time or I'm retired in the age of 65, 67, depending on the country. If you listen to Dan Buettner, the author of the Blue Zones book, he says the 2 most dangerous years in your life is year of your birth, because we still have pretty high infant mortality, and the year of your retirement. Why is that? Well, people retire and they change completely their modus operandi. Their social circle is very different. They lose the opportunity to share the wisdom, to continue to contribute to the society, to their working place. Well, that's another outdated concept. Like, and there's, I'm about to finish, but like one of the most fascinating for me, and I still haven't found the answer to that, is you think about immortality, or you think about radical life extension. I'm not a big fan of immortality. I'm actually against that. I still want to die in the age of 200 healthy and happy years. But knowing what I know about the science and technology of this space today, it's not going to be like one day you need to decide whether you're going to be immortal or not. It's very likely to be your series of life extension decisions every 2, 3, or 5 years, when you need to decide whether you're extending your life or not. Well, think about this. In the current society, today's society, it's called suicide. It's called playing God. To make decision whether you want to live or die, this is how it's called. And even if this is socially acceptable, will I have a bravery, like personally, to push the button and make this decision? I don't know. There's so many things that, and I do believe we need to start working and discussing now, today, not in 25 years.
In a moment, I'll start feeding in questions from the audience. So just a word to the audience in Zoom. There is a Q&A window, which you can find somewhere down below. You can type in your questions there. And also, if you see another question there that you think, oh, that's good, I'd like to hear the answer to that, then put your mouse over the thumbs up and add to the score. We'll probably get around all the questions, but if not, it'll be the ones with the highest thumbs up that we'll take. Let's just stick, Sergey, on this ethical issue a little bit longer. The last time we discussed something similar in one of the London Futurist events, afterwards, somebody said to me, you guys never think about the long-lived dictator problem. The people like Kim Jong-un of North Korea, or people in other totalitarian countries. If they live much longer and much healthier, it'll be terrible. And the first people to take advantage of this, there'll be these politicians. There'll also be the very rich moguls, the press barons, and so forth. Is that a reason to be careful with this technology?
Yeah, well, obviously, this is actually morality issue number 5 that I cover in the book as well. And again, I'm just one person working in longevity field. I couldn't really offer all the solutions to that, but my thoughts are, and I did discuss it actually, exactly this question with so many great minds which I interviewed for the book. So the consensus in longevity community, and specifically if you speak to like professors and academics working on that if you think about dictators, it's for in majority of cases, they don't die because of the natural reasons. They die because of the war, or because their nations are going against them. And well, this is the case with Mussolini, Hitler, and so many examples that we can draw from the recent history. So do I believe in this answer, addressing 100% of this concern? Probably not, but it's a viable idea to think about this. But then there's the other topic that you just touched in this question, David, which is affordability aspect. And I do believe it was a relevant concern 30, 50 years ago. But right now, the pace of technological innovation and democratization of like almost any invention is so enormous, so fast that I don't have this particular concern. Well, think about our smartphones. 25 years ago, mobile phone, it was not even smartphone, cost $10,000 plus. It was like really heavy box, and it was not really affordable at all for majority of us. Right now, I mean, if you're Hong Kong, you take 14 minutes speed train to Shenzhen, going to the electronic market, and for $9 US, you can buy a working new version of the smartphone. This is how fast it goes. So I'm not, and given the scientific and technological intensity of what is happening in longevity and digital healthcare space, I'm not particularly concerned about this whole division about access to rich and to poor. And again, we are in the business of bringing affordability and accessibility to this place.
You made a point of saying that one of your criteria for investments is that this therapies or treatments should be affordable and accessible. But maybe not everybody will take that view. Some companies, some VCs, venture capitalists may say they're in this to make big profits, and the big profits will come from selling exclusive treatments to rich people. What's your reason for thinking that people who take your point of view, the democratization of these solutions, will win out in the marketplace against those who are just building a profit by making very expensive therapies for those with deep pockets?
Yeah, like a few things is I've never seen any examples where in my life where something super expensive hasn't decreased in the cost. Even like when I was born 1971, 10 years after Yuri Gagarin went to space. And at this time, it was like basically impossible for me to go into space. Right now, we have a private space tourism, right? It's still extremely expensive, but with work of Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, a lot of interesting guys in this space. It's really just a matter of time where traveling to space going to be affordable and available to all of us. And similar things happening everywhere. Like, and if you think about like a drugs or interventions, there's very simple regulatory context behind that. Like, if you develop the drug, you take you can protect your IP on that for like 12 years. And in the end of this 12 years, it's becoming generic. So everyone, including factories in India and China, can produce this drug at a fraction of initial price. And this is what is happening. So that's one. Two, like, well, let's talk about in the book. One of the chapters dedicated to longevity in appeal. I do believe in 5-10 years from now, we're gonna have a special class of drugs which impact not only one particular disease, but aging processes inside our body and fight age-related diseases. Like, one of the candidates for this drug is generic called metformin, and I'm pretty sure this audience knows about this. So this is very old diabetes treating drug. I just had a discussion with Nir Barzilai, and you probably know him as well. So the man behind TAME trial, the trial where metformin is going to be tested as an anti-aging drug rather than diabetes drug in the next few years in the US, with at least 3,000 people participating. So the funny story, metformin for the trial is cheaper than placebo. Can you imagine that? So this is how cheap the generic drugs or technologies can be. And if example with metformin and smartphone is not really convincing, you can think of some other things which were like ridiculously expensive when you were at it, 10, 20 years from now in the past, and you can afford today.
The top question so far in the vote is by Neil Kane, and he's asking what you think about a concept. He calls it the longevity singularity, but more often it's called the longevity escape velocity. That at some stage quite soon, instead of the average life expectancy going up by 2 or 3 months every year, which is sort of what it does now, it'll be going up by 1 year every year. So at that stage, so long as we remain healthy and take whatever therapy is there, we could look forward to an indefinite lifespan. Is that something you believe in? Is that a nice marketing phrase? Or do you see that within, I don't know, a decade or two, we might actually reach this longevity escape velocity?
Yeah, so I mean, this is very known concept, and thanks for your question, Neil. Few thoughts on that. Obviously, it's a useful framework and paradigm to keep in mind when we think about longevity technologies and the progress in this field. So that's one. Two, as I said in a little bit earlier today, our life extension and our choose to be immortal or live radically longer is not going to be one point of time. So it's going to be regular decision every 3-5 years. We would need to make a decision whether we're extending our life or not. So this is explanation. This is just another example of longevity escape velocity point of time. Will we reach it at some point of our time? Within the evolution? Yeah, I'm pretty sure yes. Will we reach it in the current biological form? I'm not sure, because I do believe if we're gonna live somewhere beyond 150 years, we would need to redefine humans. And so it's gonna be space for augmentation, space for human avatars, either robotic or virtual ones, integration between man and machine, and like we will have an opportunity, or we need to like do a backup of our brain activity for the last month, similar to what we do with computers. So I do believe we will be able to live not 220, but 250 in the current biological form. Beyond that, it's very likely to be a complete redefinition of human as a species, both in terms of gene editing and any other technologies and scientific discoveries that we are developing today, and in terms of integration between computer world and biological world as well.
I'm sure we can discuss that further soon, but let me take the next question on the top of the list. It's by PNJ, who is surprised when you said that you look forward to dying at 200. So why would you want to die at any age?
Yeah, I don't know, man. This is very like some of the answers in your life comes from intuition, and it might be the reason I want to die at 200, but I still want to die. I do believe that if you take out the death from the human cycle, we're not going to be humans. And there's so many things in our life are driven by fear of that. Even like my work, in a way, is just another sign or reflection of that. I'm fearful of that. So I'm just not sure how my mentality, which is mentality of insecure overachiever, guy who moved from the end of nowhere to London, Boston, and New York, and has have an opportunity and been blessed with opportunity to work on the solving world global problems. How I can operate? It's probably the downside of my psychology, or there's something more behind it. It actually comes from my intuition rather than from like a work of my brain.
So you think that you'll have listened to all the music that you want to listen to, and studied all the mathematics that you want to study, and explored all of the universe that you may want to explore, or met all the interesting people, or read all the literature by that stage?
Yeah,
I think it
don't
comes
know.
down to us having freedom. You know, if people want to die
Yeah.
for whatever reason, that's fine. What I find objectionable about aging is that people who have plenty to do and want to hold on to life longer cannot, and they have to make some kind of a accommodation with aging and death.
Yeah, well, this is very interesting observation. Well, like from my experience, people go like really binary with when they hear about the opportunity to live longer or indefinitely. Like people take really binary views on that. For some of the people, they're like, Sergey, living to 200. What exactly I can do now? Like, what is the trick? Tell me immediately. I'm up for it. And some other people are like, longevity, such a depressing concept. So, you know, I really don't know. But I've seen how people get divided and groups get divided on this simple premise and this simple question.
Well, there is some discussion on exactly that point now online. Wilfred has raised a couple of questions about, well, what's so great about living to long lives, incredible ages? Already companies are trying to encourage people to take early retirement because in many companies you need to provide room for promotion for younger people. And in any case, if you're unable to have children after a certain period of time and it's hard to find employment, again, does that mean that ideas of longer life will be dispiriting and depressing?
Yeah, well, these are all very important thoughts. And I remember my interview with Jamie Metzl, the author of Hacking Darwin book, and David, you probably know him as well. He wrote the whole book on covering that topic. So a few things. One is, I do believe that the world of the future, the world where we're going to be living substantially longer, will be a completely different world in comparison to today. So what I mean by that this whole concept of work, this whole concept of retirement, going to be changed. And if you want to work, like we will be living in the world of universal basic income, of universal access to healthcare, and a lot of public goods and services. And they will go just for free. They're going to be available to us. So we will have more time to become a better version of ourselves. And if you want to work, that's okay. If you want to be an entrepreneur, that's great. Or you can just realize your dreams, or you can travel. You can go to the Mars. So that's this is the world of the future. And in terms of our ability to reproduce and what's the point of living if we will not be able to have children? If you will take a look at the last 20 to 40 years, you will see that our reproductive function is kind of, can I say, detaching, right? Yeah, is diverging from our everyday life more and more, right? We have, CRISPR babies, we have, well, so many technologies to help people who are past their reproductive age, we still can have their own kids. And this will continue. I couldn't really, this is not my area of the biggest expertise. I couldn't really tell you like how far we will go from it, but I'm pretty sure that some reproductive limitations that we have today because of the way we evolved through the history of humanity will be lifted, and we'll have more opportunities to have kids in the future, almost in any point of our time. Well, then the question is like, what do you do with kids from different generations? This is great. And then your family becomes really massive. I was just doing while writing the book, I was doing the back of envelope calculation. Like if I'm going to be turning 150 and I would like to invite, all my immediate family and all my friends. It's going to be like party of the size of 15,000 people. What do? I would need to rent a stadium for that, or do it in Zoom or whatever the platform or opportunity, or met with virtual reality. What will available in 101 years from now? But that's very interesting question, and we need to ask these questions more and have a debate around them.
You mentioned Jamie Metzl in his book Hacking Darwin, and I had Jamie Metzl as a guest on a London Futurist webinar about a year ago. His book is indeed very interesting because he talks about different ways in which people may have children in the future. Instead of children needing to be grown inside a woman's womb, increasingly they can be grown outside of a womb, and they might be fertilized from cells taken not just from the ovaries, but other parts of the body could be turned back into egg cells and sperm cells. So it may be that as well as the abolition of aging, we'll have the abolition of the menopause. And it might be that people who are much older than current parents, they'll be younger in body and they will be able to have children as well, which I think complicates the argument about the demographic changes. But as you said, and I really like this point, Sergey, we need a more creative approach to social structures. And already we have much more fluid, much more complicated families than used to be the case. Yeah. And we got used to it. You know, it's no longer so shocking to think about a child having effectively 4 parents, you know, that and beyond in terms of step parents and partners. So we do need to think about it. We do need to have it on discussion, but thankfully people are discussing it. And just before we move on to another topic, let me ask you to comment on what David Chalmers has suggested on this point. David Chalmers says, won't it be the case that when we have these therapies to make us younger and healthier, they will also boost our mental capabilities and keep us sharp? So we won't need to worry about being displaced as we are older by younger and fitter people. We will have a rejuvenation of spirit as well as the rejuvenation of body. Is that part of your vision, or do you think there's a risk that it won't happen?
Yeah, I think so. And again, we're living in a world where money is the ultimate objective for so many people, or we're living in a world of scarcity. And the world I envision us to live in when we will have access to radical life extension technologies is a world of abundance, the world where I don't need to compete with anyone for my working place, and I'll have multiple opportunities to realize myself. And don't think about money, but think about my contribution to the world, or solar system, or universe, whatever is that. I know it sounds altruistic, but like, I think each of us has our own answer to that. But it's just very important to listen to each other and try to influence today's regulatory and social and ethical agenda.
Let's take a question from Rich O'Regan, who asks, what are the top 3 technologies we can access right now to slow our aging, and how effective are they?
Yeah, so good question. I have like a special bonus chapter right in the end of the book. It's called Who Wants to Live Forever, quoting Freddie Mercury. But it is about 10 longevity choices of what you can do today to live longer. And my answer is twofold. So one is, if you're still working in paradigm of avoiding early death, and this is all the opportunities that we have today. Obviously, going through your annual screening, medical screening, is like the most important thing that you can do. Early diagnostic of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and neurodegenerative diseases, and these are like 4 killer diseases responsible for 90% of death after age of 50, is extremely important. Like, well, that's why we invest in early diagnostic of cancer, like for colon cancer. If you catch it really early, your chances to recover can be up to 90 or even 100%. If this is stage 4, your recovery chances is 20 to 30%. So when I have 30 seconds on longevity, I push people to do their annual checkups. And I'm not a medical doctor, but you couldn't really imagine the number of people who called me back and said, Sergey, you saved my life. I had early stage cancer, and because I caught it at early stage, I've managed to recover, and the quality of my life is sustained. So that's pretty important as well. And we're gonna see more diagnostic tools available to us directly, like all these direct-to-consumer tools. And like in US, if you're concerned about colon cancer, you don't need to do colonoscopy. Combination of full body MRI, obviously it should be like high power, high resolution MRI, and Cologuard, like a fecal test, or Freenome test that we invested in, which is going to be using liquid biopsy, our blood, to identify risk of colon cancer. They are as precise as colonoscopy, and they're less invasive, and they cheaper as well. So the one thing which I advise people to do is like your regular health screening should be as comprehensive as possible, with focus on these 4 kinds of diseases, right? Cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and neurodegenerative diseases. We actually don't know what we don't know about neurodegenerative diseases. We're just facing this barrier to our longevity, somewhere around 80 to 90 years. Before that, we were fighting with cancer barrier around 55, 65 years, and heart disease barrier. But things will develop itself very quickly. So that's one thing. Second thing is I always talk about power of wearables. Like, think about your car. Your car is just full of different sensors to monitor its performance and detect a problem at a really early stage. And if you compare value of my life with the value of my car, it's just really incomparable, right? So we need to have this habit and the interest to use wearables, to use sensors. And again, just to repeat, my Oura Ring is here, measure my sleep, right? I'm experimenting with 2 variables. I'm using continuous glucose monitor. I'm in New York on Monday, so I'm gonna wear the Zio patch, this patch which takes electrocardiogram and the work of my heart for 7 days in a row. So that's extremely important. And if we've done it with our cars, we have to do it with our bodies. They're much more important for us. And where I want to finish with answer to that question, you would be amazed what is the power of simple lifestyle changes and the influence of them on your aging process. I don't know if you've seen this research, David. I think it was published last month. Group of 50 plus years old people, 8 weeks of lifestyle changes in 3 areas: diet, sleep, and physical activity, minus 3 years on biological clocks. Imagine that we all, like in 8 weeks time, we all can be 3 years younger. This is amazing. This is age reversal. And obviously, it's important to stay on longevity bridge to be healthy and happy in the next 5, 10, 15 years, so we can enjoy the benefits of all these technologies which are coming up or will be available to us within the near horizon of longevity. I hope I did answer your question.
And I will also say that I know you have got some other very interesting and very practical information in that final chapter of your book, so it is worth looking at. But in terms of having an annual checkup, isn't that expensive?
Well, David, it's very difficult to give generic advice, because every country on earth has its own understanding of what is the basic offering in terms of healthcare service. So it depends what I'm pretty sure in majority of countries, I'm not aware of how it's done in UK. You can have a certain version of your annual checkup almost for free, or the part of your insurance, right? Or the part of your like an ordinary basic healthcare offering. And this is where you start. So that's one. 2 is, one would argue, like in US, the basic checkup can be anywhere between $2.5 and $5,000. It's a lot of money. But like, if you compare this to the cost to your future healthcare costs to treat these diseases on a later stage, this is like the best investment you can make in life. So I've seen somewhere that the cost of proactive and preventive treatment is 10 to 20 times less than cost of emergency response in emergency room. to the same disease. Well, this is the economics. And again, like, think about wearables, Apple Watch or Fitbit or Whoop or Garmin, it doesn't matter. In 2-3 years time, they will become our personalized healthcare devices. They will measure, glucose, our blood pressure. They already measure the work of our heart. They have a fall detector. There's so many things which will be measured by our wearables. So the cost of detection, the cost of early diagnostic will really goes down. You just need to be technologically curious and experiment with wearables and understand their role in your life as a today or future personalized healthcare device.
And just a little bit further on this, you mentioned that you are on various advisory councils. You speak to politicians, amongst others. Do they get this? Do they understand the economic benefits of investing in preventive healthcare? And do they understand that if we could actually push back the average life expectancy and retain health, it would have huge economic benefits? Or are they just, well, how much of this do they understand?
Yeah. Well, working with, let me be very transparent. Like working with governments is the most disappointing type of activity that I do. And there's a logic behind that. I actually love working with corporations. They're commercial enterprises. They have hierarchical structure, clear priorities. So if you get buy-in for the corporate longevity program from CEO or the founder and head of people, it's like 50% of success. And it is with very minimal investments, sometimes with zero investments, you can change life of thousands of people. Like the largest corporate longevity program that I've done, again for free, was 300,000 people in 20 plus countries. It was one of the largest financial institutions on earth. So, let's talk about government. Think about this. Government is busy all the time with sorting one type of issues. They should be both urgent and important. And the problem of national health is always important, but never urgent. That's why it gets, with exception of 2020 and COVID, the external shock that we had. Well, this is the problem. They only understand it's important, but there's something urgent always come up. And again, I still haven't found the answer to that question. I've seen very few governments on earth. Usually it's pretty small countries, up to 10 million people population, who understand the beauty and importance of managing public health. Like Singapore, United Arab Emirates, these are the examples that I have.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about Singapore, because it does seem, from my experience of their civil service, that they are more organized on this topic than at least some other countries. So there are some. You said it was a bit depressing working, or disappointing working with some governments, but hopefully there will be some more inspiring interactions you've had as well.
Yeah, like the government of Singapore doesn't need me. I need government of Singapore to learn from them. It's been amazing, and what they do there. This is a great subject. Just to illustrate one thing, great healthcare doesn't need to be expensive. So U.S. has the most expensive and the most inefficient healthcare system in the world, in developed world. U.S. spends 18% of its GDP on healthcare. And you know what? For the last 5 years, pre-COVID, 3 out of 5 years, they had decline in the lifespan, in the average lifespan in the country. This is ridiculous. UK, as far as I recall, spends 8% of GDP on healthcare. And UK numbers are better in terms of life expectancy. And in Singapore, who shares first place in the world, both in terms of health span, average health span and average lifespan, with Japan, spends what? 5% of its GDP on healthcare. So it doesn't, like, the best healthcare doesn't really need to be expensive.
Let's move back to questions from the audience. The one at the top now is by Didier Cornell. I think I know what your answer is going to be, but let's ask it anyway. He's asking about progress with maximal lifespan. He points out that the person you mentioned earlier, the French woman Jeanne Calment, who is the world record holder with 122 years of age. She actually died 24 years ago now in 1997. The nearest aged person to that today is a Japanese lady, Kane Tanaka, who's 118. Do you think we should prioritize boosting that maximal lifespan, or do you think it's going to come almost automatically from all the other interventions you've talked about?
Yeah, the second one. I do think it's going to be like a positive side effect from working on helping people to live longer, healthier and happier life on average. Well, that's why my mission is to change as many lives as possible. In fact, it's changing 1 million lives by bringing this affordable and accessible version of healthcare. I'm not really in the business, because the maximum lifespan will always be like for a few ones, while I'm really interested in the bigger numbers for this to become a universal basic right, good or service. So that's one. Second thing, I do think that there's something wrong with our model of longevity today if we look at centenarians, because today's centenarians are not a best example of how to live longer. Almost all of them, and if you look at the study, like 70% of cases, their ability to live longer, above 100 years, were genetically predisposed. They just been lucky in genetic lottery in a good way. And we already know all 3,000 genes in our DNA, which are responsible for longer living. So they just, like, Mother Nature gave them this blessing, and this is why they live beyond 100 years. Obviously, they haven't done any stupid choices in terms of the environment and taking unnecessary risks. But like in a lot of cases, they just not the right example for us today on how to live longer. That's why you will always find someone who will say, oh, come on, my granddad, he was just living 200 years and he was smoking until his last day. Of course, these are the people who are genetically predisposed to live longer. And well, that's why genetic solution to aging is one of the avenues that we will be exploring, how to influence part of these 3,000 genes who are responsible for aging in our body to make us living longer and healthier.
Demetrius Vaginas asks about the fact you mentioned that it takes 12 years to put a new drug into the store, and for each successful one, there can be up to 5,000 failures. Do you have ideas on doing this kind of research better? Is the risk that we have a current winner-takes-all model in which people keep a lot of the research secret, and then each company fails in the same way without realizing they're failing in the same way? Would collaborative research go faster, or do you have other ideas on speeding up this sad, slow process? Yeah,
great question. It's $1 trillion question. I like it, Dimitris. So what do I think? I do think, well, let me be a little bit provocative here. I do think that the current model of the industry, like whether it's big pharma or insurance-based medicine, is outdated and needs to be changed. But I do believe the changes in this world will come not from old players doing new things. The change in this world will become from new players disrupting this whole space. That's why I'm talking about Amazon, Apple, Google, Microsoft, which will be the largest healthcare companies on earth. That's why we are embracing and supporting the companies who are using artificial intelligence, leveraging the wisdom of a lot of research. It's just some sort of collaboration done not by humans, but by machine, to make sure the drug discovery and drug development process is much more effective and relevant. And my final thought on that is regulation needs to change as well. In some of the countries like US, we have extremely conservative regulatory system. And you know what was the biggest driver of this change? COVID. Like before COVID, 20% of doctors were considering one day using telemedicine. 1 year later, 50% of doctors doing telemedicine every day. Well, this is unfortunate reality. We do respond to external shocks, And this is how regulation has evolved. COVID, for good or for bad, done more things to change the regulatory environment in the US and in the world than any other efforts that we took.
And it is amazing how quickly some of these vaccines were developed. I'm glad they were tested, because there's a lot of people who are still scared about vaccines being untested, and there were in the past some vaccines that were released without proper testing, which did have bad side effects, not many, but some. So I'm glad there is testing, but I'm with you. We have to find ways of doing that testing faster and smarter, and maybe better AI can help there too.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a question from Terry Raby, which is more personal. When you've mentioned you've had some personal epiphanies, you caught the longevity bug at some stage. Now that you've been in this field, has this caused you to rethink what humans are for? You know, instead of just thinking, well, we are here to live 70 or 80 or 90 years and then make way for new generations. Do you have new thinking about the potential for humanity?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Terry. And well, it's been very humbling to be a longevity enthusiast. And well, I don't feel depressed about the things that I'm about to say in a minute, but some people think they're pretty pessimistic. I think we all overestimating our importance within the evolution. That's why I'm saying it was very humbling. Like, my life or my death, it doesn't really even matter. So when people ask me, like, do you really want to live 200 years? And I'm like, if I can, that would be great. But if I will die in the age of 85, but I will manage to support a lot of breakthroughs in healthcare, enforce and support the changes, positive changes in our societies, I'll be like the happiest man on earth one day before my death. So in a way, I think we just, we have this culture of like being so egocentric in a very neutral way, right? Not judgmental way. We tend to think like we are like the center of universe. We're so important. And we're not. We're just one of the species on Earth who just won in this evolutionary contest. And well, let's see what will happen. Who knows? Probably we even like just transitionary form of humans before going into humans 2.0, where the man and machine going to be integrated.
When you say you feel that you're just one person, but you have done a lot. You've done the longevity fund, and now you're doing the Age Reversal X Prize. I wanted to ask you about that, by the way, because why do we need an X Prize more than just the various existing investments? And what do you hope to accomplish from that?
Yeah, so simple question is longevity is underinvested, and without the change in regulation, it's going to be very difficult to draw the talent and investments there. And what X Prize does is it builds on enthusiasm and builds on passions of the people. So 200, 300, 400 teams around the world, they're going to be self-funded. They would need to look for their own funding. And I do believe that the current system where we delegated all longevity and healthcare research and development to big pharma, academic institutions, governments, is outdated, and we need to have like a fresh blood and more thoughts and new talents in the space. That's why this incentive-based competition, where the winner or the short list of the winners will get the prize, is an amazing way to support development of this space.
At this point, I would like to mention something that David Chalmers has been raising with me in chat. David Chalmers has recently been appointed as the Executive Director of SENS Foundation Europe. And that is one foundation that is backing investment in companies that maybe aren't yet attracting private funding from VCs. So David mentions that if you have an Amazon Smile set up, you can nominate Sens as the recipient of the donations. And so when you buy books on Amazon, it doesn't cost you a single penny more than currently, but that small portion, I think it's 0.5%, can be redirected. So David's just posted that information now into the chat window. So that was just one way in which people can help. What else do you think, Sergey, people can do if they're inspired by this and they think, actually, it would be good if more people were thinking harder about these issues and pursuing creative solutions to healthier living rather than just more of the same? What should people on this call be thinking about?
Human health and longevity is a very important and risky space. Risky in a way it does require professional education to give advice of what kind of needs to be done and how we need to live and change our life and our health routine. But what I wanted to say, it all starts with a personal choice. Don't think about billions of people. Well, think about your life of your loved ones, of your family, your friends, and your community, and try to change it. There's so many things that we can do today, like in terms of, underlying importance of annual health screening. Don't dine stupid, just making good choices, not taking unnecessary risks like driving motorcycles or do tobacco smoking, which is like tobacco smoking is just minus 10 years from your life statistically, or be more responsible in your lifestyle choices, or changing the diet, like decreasing the calories by 15 to 25% will extend your lifespan and health span by 3, 5, even 7 years. So start with you, be an example. And I've seen a lot of cases where change in one person stimulated the change of communities around. This would be my advice. I know we have this tendency of like thinking global, like, I need to join the movement. I need to change this, I need to go to the street to protest. But like, it's time to take responsibility for your own health. Think about this. We delegated almost all our health-related decisions to other parties, to doctors, big pharma, insurance company, government, healthcare providers. I'm not saying you should be like the one making this decision, but you should be an important part of dialogue. So go on discovery path. Try to understand your own biology, how your body works, what your body responds to in a good way. Well, this is amazing start, and this is where I started, and I really enjoy it.
We're almost out of time for the first session of this event. I'll take maybe one or two more questions, and then after a short break, people who are still here will be welcome to move into a more informal chatting session. And if people want to continue even beyond that, Brian from Canada has put some notes in the chat about a after talk pub. You go to meet.c and there's a code in the chat which people can use to get to there. I would like to pose a question from Yates Buckley. He is wondering about the risks that if we engineer humans by various methods to try and help us be healthier and longer lived, is there a risk that we might end up with the equivalent of a kind of monoculture, something that seems healthy and efficient, but then can be laid waste by some new infection? Are you thinking about resilience as well as just efficiency, to use these engineering terms?
I'm not a big fan of efficiency. Yeah, I'm a big fan of supporting differences and diversity in people. And this is an important question. Frankly speaking, I don't have an answer. And I do believe while we will have humans on Earth, we'll always have enormous diversity of backgrounds, priorities, values, interests, objectives, feelings and emotions, and creativity as well. So I'm a great believer in that.
Thanks.
But this is more like a belief, right? So I couldn't really build the logic behind that.
And you've mentioned several times that you have an understanding of some parts of this topic, but there are many other topics where other people are potentially expert. Steve Buss, who is in Oregon, he raises a question about how we can integrate all the knowledge that many people have. I mean, he's worried that there are actually good findings which haven't been brought to sufficient attention. He says if the detailed findings of the longevity science literature could be properly integrated and understood, this is likely to achieve longevity escape velocity faster. So, I mean, is this something else that AI might help us with?
Yeah.
Or do we need different approaches to sharing ideas?
Thanks for the question, Steve. And that's a great question. So I think we humans already had a chance to do that. And we're doing this somehow, not necessarily in the best way. But I do believe the fact that we bring in more data-based approach, more technological approach, and it is the big data. Like, the companies who are like working on the early cancer diagnostic, they analyzed 100,000 data sets, is an opportunity to involve computers there. And like some of the works that I've seen in AI, in artificial intelligence space, it's enormous. AI has this enormous ability to find interconnection and relevance between such a distant pieces of knowledge or data, which human mind will never be able to do. Like, it's similar. I don't know if you've seen this, if you have this experience in Navigator, when you just put on your Google map, like where you navigate. Sometimes, and specifically in traffic situation, it's actually asks you to go against, like almost the other way from your target destination, and then it's going to be the easier, fastest way to find, for you to arrive to your final destination. So this is the counterintuitive things which we humans couldn't do, but machines will help. But that's a hope.
Well, there are still a few questions left. Sergey, I'll give you a chance in a few minutes to make some final remarks on anything that you think deserves more attention. What I'm going to do is briefly run through a few issues about what's coming next with London Futurists. So let me share the right part of my screen here. Where has it gone? I had this a minute ago. Right. So today we have been in this session with Sergey Young, and we've learned a lot. We are coming to a similar topic in 4 weeks' time. It's another approach to anti-aging research. This is by Dr. Harold Katcher, and whereas Sergey, along with many others in the field, are embracing a diversity of approaches, there are a few researchers, including Dr. Katcher, who believes that there's a single point which will make the biggest difference in reversing aging. So there's a new book coming out by Dr. Katcher, and it talks about some very interesting experiments that he has performed recently. It's not quite young blood transfusion. It's something similar to that, and it does seem that with the right plasma infusion into the blood of mammals, it can reduce their effective age as measured by biomarkers. So he has some very interesting and quite challenging things to say. So that is in 4 weeks' time. And by the way, that's starting 1 hour later than our normal events due to a scheduling issue. In just 1 week's time, we are looking at something that Sergey briefly touched on, which is in the future, humans and the machines might somehow merge, or humans might become more machine-like. And if it's just replacing some of our organs like the liver or even the heart, there's no big philosophical questions. But if we start talking about moving our mind from one brain substrate into another, or if we're talking about re-engineering parts of the brain, are there concerns about consciousness? Might we end up able to pass a Turing test, but not actually have any consciousness left inside there? So Dr. Professor Susan Snyder, who is the founding director for the Center of Future Mind, will be our guest in 1 week's time at the usual 4 p.m. UK starting time. And she'll actually be sharing some ideas from a forthcoming book that's still at an early stage of preparation. So it's not a finished book, in which she's going to talk about possible emergence of a global brain and lots of other angles about the future of mind. There are other things about AI which I'd briefly like to mention. This is a project which you will find on the London Futurist website. The Vital Syllabus is trying to do what has been suggested in some of the questions, which is to bring information together in a clear and accessible way. And there are some videos that have been added in the last few days on the subject of AI reaching artificial superintelligence level and all that might follow from that, the good and the bad. So there's one video on the singularitarian stance. There's one on the dark side of people who believe in the singularity. That's the singularity shadow. There's another video on the denial of the singularity. What is it that motivates otherwise intelligent, thoughtful, knowledgeable people to deny that there is anything to worry about, the singularity, or that it's even possible? And the fourth video in this series, which is currently available, is an introduction to what I call the singularity principles, which are recommendations to increase the likelihood that oncoming disruptive technological changes will be profoundly positive for humanity rather than deeply detrimental. These are all online resources. There are currently no fixed plans for London Futurists to meet in real life yet. Perhaps later this year, I will point briefly to one real life meeting, which is taking place in October in the city of Madrid. It is Transvision 2021. It's the latest in a series of conferences that goes all the way back to 1998 with the theme of designing the future, using technology wisely so that we have a better future for everyone. More details of that are on the website at transvisionmadrid.com. And by the way, as well as having 3 days of formal presentations and discussions, there are optionally 2 more days in which people who have made the effort to travel to Madrid will go along with other futurists to sightseeing, and surely discussing futurist topics in the middle of that sightseeing as well. So details are online. That brings me to what's going to happen in the very short future. We've had a talk now, we've had 90 minutes roughly, in which there's been a discussion between myself and the speaker, Sergey Young. We've had the questions and answers. We're going to take a roughly 10-minute break. And I know that some people will have to leave because we've all got other things to do, but some of us can stay if you want to take part in a sort of debrief of what you've just heard. And I will invite everybody who stays to change from being an audience member to being a full panelist, which means your microphones will be opened and you can, if you wish, come on camera. I will look for comments of maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes. What you particularly liked about this event, something you heard maybe is going to change your life in some way, what you would like to add into the discussion, things that you believe need to be said next, or possibly suggested follow-ups for things to do next as a project or as another formal event. So that will take us back to what we've heard today by Sergey. What are your final remarks that you'd like to have people carry with them as they move on, Sergey?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you. It was really enjoyable discussion and so many thoughtful questions. I took some of them to reflect, and it's always important to receive this high quality input and challenging input like I had today. Well, I do think the whole premise of the book is we're all going to be living longer or radically longer. So it's time to rethink, our usual paradigms and rethink our personal health strategy, family strategy, financial strategy as well. And it's very important to stay on longevity bridge while we're waiting for this brilliant technology and science to arrive. And obviously there's this whole topic of ethical and moral aspects, and change should start with us, with our own choices. With this, stay healthy and happy. It was really enjoyable time today. Thank you.
Well, it was really enjoyable to browse my way through this fine book, which I was pleased to receive an advance copy, which gave me lots to think about. There is packed full of information, some of which I knew, but others was certainly refreshing, and I searched that online as a result of that. And there's an energy and a drive there, which I also commend. Sergey, thanks so much for sharing all these things. I will send you a copy of the questions in the chat to reflect on if you wish. And now I'm going to terminate the recording and terminate the session, but it's now 32 minutes past the hour, according to my computer. At 40 minutes past the hour, those who are still here, having stretched their legs, recharged their coffee, or in my case, green tea, or anything else healthy, will be welcome to continue. So